Russia's rapid invasion. Ukraine battles to ward off Moscow's attacks, tens of thousands caught in the crossfire. World leaders refusing to sit by, calling on Russia to back down.
Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
But Ukraine's president warns sanctions on Moscow by the West are not enough. Thousands rally in Russia, risking their lives to condemn Vladimir Putin's actions. While Ukrainians in Australia say they're struggling to come to terms with the violence gripping their homeland.
This is SBS World News with Catalina Flores.
Good evening. There are fears over the security of Ukraine's capital, with reports of missile attacks early this morning. A senior United States defence official says there's evidence Moscow plans to encircle Kyiv. Over the past 24 hours, key cities and towns across Ukraine have been caught up in conflict with Russia's military, with 100,000 Ukrainians believed to be displaced, according to the UN Refugee Agency. More than 130 Ukrainian civilians and troops were killed on the first day of the Russian invasion, according to Ukraine's president. That's despite Russia saying it's only targeting military infrastructure. The attacks have been swift. Severe new sanctions issued from countries around the world, Australia among those hardening restrictions today. Meanwhile, protesters have called for peace, including those in more than 50 Russian cities. Well, joining us now from Lviv in Ukraine's west with the latest is Chief International Correspondent Ben Lewis. Good evening, Ben. It's only early morning there now, but there's barely been a lull overnight.
Yeah, not at all, Catalina. Good evening. We have heard air raid sirens sounding right across Kiev and also here in Lviv, which is why we're in a slightly more protected position today than yesterday. Ukrainian defence officials say they believe Russian troops will attempt to enter the outskirts of the capital in the coming hours, and that Russian saboteurs may already be operating inside the city. Ukrainian forces are fighting back hard, but Vladimir Putin so far has only deployed a fraction of the firepower he has available to him. This conflict is going to get much worse. Massive fireballs light up the sky as the Ukrainian capital comes under attack. Explosions have been heard across Kyiv. Reports of Russian cruise and ballistic missiles striking both military and civilian targets. Russian troops are within 40 kilometres of the city, according to the Ukrainian Interior Ministry. Residents are hunkering down underground in what was once a bustling subway station, now a makeshift bomb shelter. Pets and crosswords help to pass the time as the grim reality of war sinks in.
Мы не готовились к тому, чтобы бежать отсюда. Никто не верил в то, что эта война прям вот начнется и в то, что будет прям захват Киева.
Была паника, истерика, слезы. Страшно за родных, за близких, за друзей. И непонятно, что вообще делать, куда бежать и как себя вести.
Traffic was gridlocked as people tried to leave Kyiv. The UN says more than 100,000 people have fled the country so far. In Lviv, the population will swell in the coming days as more refugees head west, many reluctantly. Normally a bustling tourist town, today the only crowds are outside ATMs, hard currency crucial in a crisis. Locals are confident this will remain a relatively safe haven.
I'm not panicking because the panic is not productive. We're not going to leave Lviv. My parents are here.
If I was younger, I would take a machine gun and go to the front line. There's no choice. I'm willing to give my life. I've lived a full life. I'm ready to protect my Ukraine.
Many have already given their lives, including the Ukrainian border guards stationed on the strategic Snake Island. Their purported last stand heard in this audio that can't be independently verified. In the country's east, residents of Donetsk survey the damage after heavy shelling.
В ванной прятались. Ну, у меня в спальне 2 окна разбито.
Ukrainian government officials have confirmed Russia has captured the Chernobyl power plant, the site of the devastating 1986 nuclear disaster. President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country is fighting to stop a new Iron Curtain after Russian invasion and has asked for international help.
У 27 лідерів Європи, чи буде Україна в НАТО? Запитав прямо. Всі бояться. Не відповідають.
According to the State Border Guard Service, Ukraine's male citizens aged between 18 and 60 are now banned from leaving the country. Others are returning voluntarily.
To jest mój ojciec. Też ma pochodzenie polskie, Wadim. Jedzie na Ukrainę, żeby to bronić. Żeby wszystko obronić.
Many now answering the call to take up arms. The European Union and the United States have announced a massive new package of sanctions against Russia. The measures will target Russian banks, oligarchs and the country's high-tech sector. US President Joe Biden says he has not yet decided if Vladimir Putin should be sanctioned personally.
Against a superpower rival using live weapons, President Biden using words.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war. And now he and his country will bear the consequences.
The White House weapon in this fight, sanctions to throttle Russia's economy and muzzle key oligarchs.
We will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen to be part of the global economy.
European Union leaders agreeing sanctions that target 70% of the Russian banking market, plus key state-owned companies, including in defence.
We will hold the Kremlin accountable. The package of massive and targeted sanctions European leaders approved tonight clearly demonstrates that.
Britain's Boris Johnson announcing the UK's retaliatory measures.
These powers will enable us totally to exclude Russian banks from the UK financial system, which is, of course, by far the largest in Europe.
But while number 10 was bathed in Ukraine's colours of yellow and blue, in Moscow, Vladimir Putin meeting with Russian business leaders, betraying no suggestion the coordinated sanctions give him any pause.
Russia remains a part of the world economy. As long as it remains a part of it, we don't intend harming the system we feel a part of.
And even as EU leaders arrived in Brussels full of determination,
we cannot take the luxury to be discussion club.
On either side of the Atlantic, no illusions how long sanctions might take.
Impact is really felt over time as, again, it spreads across the economy about their ability to raise money, to conduct transactions around the world. That will be felt more and more and more over time.
President Biden disputing sanctions were ever meant to be a deterrent.
No one expected the sanctions to prevent anything from happening.
Yet that's precisely what his vice president said this week.
The purpose of the sanctions has always been and continues to be deterrent.
In the streets of New York, protesters against Putin, while blocks away at the United Nations, the Secretary General could do no more than plead with him.
I repeat my appeal from last night to President Putin. Stop the military operation. Bring the troops back to Russia.
The Secretary General announcing $25 million to meet urgent humanitarian needs in Ukraine. But Ukraine's Washington ambassador desperate for further measures.
We believe all financial institutions should be sanctioned. We believe Russia should be discontinued from SWIFT.
SWIFT is the global system that allows for the transfers of money from bank to bank. Joe Biden becoming irritated when pressed on why sanctions don't include it.
Specifically, with the sanctions we've imposed exceed SWIFT. The sanctions we imposed exceed anything that's ever been done. They are profound sanctions. Let's have a conversation in another month or so to see if they're working.
Stand with Ukraine! But for pro-Ukraine demonstrators outside the White House, in the current environment, a month or two feels like a lifetime. Prue Luan, SBS World News.
In the last few minutes, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has addressed the nation again in both Ukrainian and in Russian. He called for talks to begin to discuss a ceasefire. He said Russia will have to talk to us sooner or later about how to end hostilities and stop this invasion. We will be defending our country until then. He also said he has no intention of leaving the capital and understands that he is Russia's #1 target right now. Catalina increasingly clear that Vladimir Putin's main goal is to encircle Kiev and force a change in government. The Ukrainian president says he's not going anywhere.
Thank you for the very latest as always. That's Ben Lewis from Lviv in Ukraine's west. Well, Prime Minister Scott Morrison has directly targeted Beijing for failing to call out Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He's accused China of providing Moscow a lifeline as global allies ramp up sanctions to punish the attack. He's also announced additional penalties will be imposed against members of Russia's elite to align Australia's response to the crisis.
A show of solidarity with Ukrainian Australians, far from the firing line but still burdened by the weight of war.
There must be a cost, there must be a price, and it must be imposed by the global community.
The Prime Minister unveiling more sanctions against Russia's elite, targeting wealthy and influential oligarchs, over 300 members of Russia's parliament, and key individuals in Belarus deemed complicit.
We are all working together to shut Russia out.
But as global allies ratchet up their response to the crisis, inaction is also earning condemnation.
And I particularly have been concerned at the lack of a strong response from China.
After Beijing avoided directly criticising Russia's president over the attack.
China is closely monitoring the latest situation. We call on all sides to exercise restraint to prevent the situation from getting out of control.
The Chinese government overnight also easing restrictions on imports of Russian wheat.
You don't go and throw a lifeline to Russia in the middle of a period when they're invading another country. That is simply unacceptable.
China should demonstrate it is serious about global peace and security. And China is doing the exact opposite.
Russia and China earlier this month reaffirmed their close ties, declaring what's been proclaimed a no-limits partnership.
President Xi is probably the one world leader who can actually pick the phone up to President Putin to tell him that this is a catastrophic mistake and he should withdraw.
The diplomatic pressure coming after Beijing's top diplomat in Australia made this pitch to reset the relationship.
China is willing to work with Australia to meet each other halfway.
Diplomatic channels are not underway when ministers and political leaders are not prepared to meet.
Australia's influence against Russia's invasion is limited. Troops won't be deployed on the ground, instead relying on efforts with global allies to counter Moscow's aggression.
We are not in a position to support combat operations in Ukraine, and no one else in NATO is seriously contemplating doing that.
Australia will send medical supplies and non-military equipment, with expectation they'll be desperately needed. Tom Stainer, SBS World News.
Well, coming up next, opposition to the war in Russia. Security forces crack down on street protests. What is Vladimir Putin's endgame? The US is clear to re-establish the former Soviet Union. And expatriate Russians in a show of solidarity with Australia's Ukrainian community.
Tonight at 7:30, we journey through stunning scenery in a new episode of The Lakes with Simon Reeve. Then, it's new how to build a nuclear power station. And later, it's the pyramids solving the mystery.
Eurovision really is the ultimate dream for me.
Eurovision has always been a part of my world.
I feel like I've got so much to prove.
Are you ready?
You decide, yes, you.
See you there.
Eurovision, Australia Decides. Tomorrow, 8:30 on SBS. A world of difference.
Oreo, stay playful.
There are so many ways to live better, and at Medibank, we want to help every Australian find theirs. all for free. You could try online classes with Sydney Dance Company, or weekly park runs in your local area. Even meditating to heavy metal. To find a free activity for you, search Medibank Live Better activities today.
That's it, lightning quick. Mate, you are a maniac. Push, come on, and time! Woo!
Search ANZ Financial Wellbeing.
Hooray! Woo! It's all downhill from here, Gary.
Too right, though. We're not getting any younger.
Are you covered if something happens to you?
Gary?
Come on, buddy.
We've all got to face it eventually, Gaz. It's good to be prepared.
We can see you, Gary.
Insurance Line, here for the heavy stuff.
Welcome to Celebrity Letters and Numbers.
I would love to choose a consonant, thank you very much.
Let's start with X.
Oh, didn't want that one. Can you put that one back?
The new season of Celebrity Letters and Numbers starts Saturday the 5th of March on SBS and on demand.
All hail Macbeth.
Celebrate the films of a once-in-a-generation actor. Focus on Michael Fassbender concludes with Macbeth. Tonight 9:30 on SBS World Movies and On Demand.
Beyond the major cities, ordinary Ukrainians are also feeling the force of Russia's military as it targets military infrastructure. Airfields and depots have reportedly been hit, including in the eastern city of Dnipro, where shelling was heard before dawn.
All of Ukraine is a front line now. The night sky even lit up here in Dnipro as Russian missiles hit a military depot on the outskirts of town. At dawn, a military airfield near Poltava to the north was targeted. Explosions echo through peaceful villages, agricultural fields, and now battlefields. Well, wouldn't you cry? I'm alone, she says. Where should I run? Where should I go? My God. She's in Mariupol, one of the most vulnerable towns, just near Crimea, territory Russia annexed 8 years ago, when President Putin started his land grab for Ukraine. A military facility on the outskirts of the town was smouldering. The Russians had attacked the radar and other equipment, the destruction of air defences across the country being their priority. And more CCTV, this apparently showing a missile strike on a warehouse in the Black Sea port of Odessa, west of Crimea. A fighter jet releases a missile. Over the border in Russia, missiles target Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv. At dawn in the eastern town of Kramatorsk, after overnight explosions, people I met seemed stunned as they started to queue for cash. What will you do now? Will you stay here or will you try and go west?
We don't know yet, because this is happening all over the country. So where should we go?
As we drove west, we passed long queues for petrol. Everyone wants to fill up, even if they don't know where to go, or if they just want to defy the invaders.
I'm going to fill my tank and go fishing.
And what do you feel about President Putin this morning?
Why is he coming to our country? We can sort out our own problem. Why interfere in our lives?
Lindsay Hilsum reporting there. Well, from Tokyo to London, thousands of protesters around the world have voiced their opposition to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But Russians are also critical of their president's shock decision and have taken to the streets to decry the aggression.
In President Putin's hometown of St. Petersburg, hundreds of people have gathered in defiance. They are part of a surge of anti-war protests in more than 50 cities across Russia, begging their president to withdraw from Ukraine.
He must stop it. The only thing we can do is say that we disagree.
In Moscow, dozens of protesters scuffle with police. These arrests are part of at least 1,700 Russians detained across the country.
We believe that conflict must be resolved peacefully, without violence from any side.
But at the Russian embassy in Tel Aviv, Israelis are urging the Russian home front to make more noise.
Go to protest. I know it could be scary, but this is the only thing you can do. And this is probably the only thing that will stop him.
Protests also erupting on the streets of Ukraine's closest neighbours. In Romania, Ukrainian expats are praying for their families. But for those in Poland, they say this invasion feels far too familiar. Their country was invaded by Germany in 1939, sparking the start of World War II.
Dzisiejszy Putin to nikt inny jak Hitler. To Adolf w innej postaci.
A plea for peace is the single message reverberating across the globe. In central Tokyo, Ukrainian expats said they feel helpless.
Since I'm here, I can only come here and tell the world that we don't want the war and we want peace.
Crowds are gathering outside Russian embassies in South America too. In Santiago, a sea of blue and yellow filled the streets, all generations gathering in support of Ukraine. And in the Argentinian capital, Russians are among the protesters.
Ukrainians are our friends.
This unified approach being urged on the streets of London too.
There's a myth that Ukraine is very much divided, which is not true, because I think today Ukraine has never been so united.
Thousands standing with Ukraine as the world waits for what's to come. Jennifer Scherer, SBS World News.
So for more reactions out of Europe, let's now go to correspondent Trent Murray, who joins us from the German capital, Berlin. Good evening, Trent. We're hearing Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's impassioned pleas for help. What's the feeling like on the ground on whether European leaders, including the new German Chancellor, are doing enough?
Yeah, good evening, Catalina. I think much of Europe is watching this horror unfold and feeling a certain sense of helplessness, knowing that they cannot intervene militarily to help try and repel this Russian invasion in Ukraine. And so all we're left with is these kind of slow diplomatic burning of sanctions that the European Union is pushing. We've heard in the last couple of hours some more details about what those sanctions look like. It includes everything from Russian asset freezes here in the EU, cutting off Russian banks from accessing European financial markets, even an export ban on European-made airplane parts in order to try and target Russia's transport industry. But of course, those sanctions from Vladimir Zelensky's perspective may be too little too late. Of course, he is bunkered down in the capital as the bombs are falling there on his country, and he knows that Europe and the US really is not able to come to his aid. The Ukrainians very much are left on their own in all of this to try and defend their territory.
Trent, for many decades now, Europe has been largely peaceful. Is there a real fear of what's to come in the Ukraine conflict?
Well, I think to give you the best sense of that, you only have to look at the latest meeting that we've had with NATO. 8 NATO members, all countries on the eastern flank of the alliance, calling a special meeting to discuss Article 4. Now, Article 4 is a section of NATO which essentially suggests that the security of a member is under threat, according to their government. Well, 8 governments say that their security is under threat, they believe, because of this conflict in Ukraine, because of the effects that could happen, very worried about it potentially spilling over into their territory. And so following that NATO meeting, we're also seeing another one being held today. That one will include President Joe Biden to discuss all of this. We, of course, know more US troops are coming here to Germany. We are also worried and expecting a large wave of refugees having to leave this conflict zone. And even more concerningly, we have just heard in the past few hours that the Russian troops have captured the Chernobyl nuclear exclusion zone. Obviously, any sort of unrest there could have much wider ramifications. So it certainly has got many people in Europe watching this very, very closely and very, very nervously.
Indeed. Thank you for that update. Trent Murray there from Berlin. For months, the West had warned a Russian invasion of Ukraine was imminent. The events of the past 36 hours ultimately playing out precisely as they predicted. Vladimir Putin claims he had no choice but to embark on this deadly military incursion, describing it as the least evil option. But analysts and world leaders say it was meticulously premeditated. Critics believe the president is hell-bent to see the Soviet Union restored.
By air, land and sea, Russia's assault on Ukraine came with crushing swiftness. Its overwhelming force felt across the country, destroying lives, shattering diplomatic efforts, and forever changing the course of history.
This is a profound shift in the global order. It's the creation of a new Cold War. It changes so much of the way globalization can and cannot persist going forward.
What's been ticking in Vladimir Putin's mind, we'll likely never know. Hours after launching the biggest invasion of a European country since World War II, the former KGB agent, described by France's president as duplicitous, justified his decision to his nation's business leaders.
Everything that's going on is a least evil solution. They created such security risks that we couldn't react otherwise. All our attempts failed. To be honest, I'm even surprised by what's occurred.
As the president tried to cultivate an air of business as usual, also meeting with Pakistan's Prime Minister, Russian state television praised his actions, calling the invasion a special operation to prevent genocide. The foreign minister appearing somewhat uncomfortable by the entire situation.
As we take the measures announced by the president to ensure the security of the country and the Russian people, we certainly would always be ready for a dialogue.
Ukraine is a nation President Putin has long shown antipathy towards. Only days ago he said its entire existence wasn't possible without Russia. The invasion viewed by global powers as Putin's attempt to take what he always believed was his.
He has much larger ambitions in Ukraine. He wants to, in fact, reestablish the former Soviet Union. That's what this is about.
That assessment shared by some analysts who are still struggling to comprehend what's happened.
I believe that what started on the 24th of February was the beginning of World War III. I believe that he is hell-bent on the restoration of the Soviet Union, the new empire of fear. He wants the neighbors and his partners to live in constant fear of his unpredictable actions.
But what and where to next? A question the world, and possibly even Russia's unpredictable president, don't know the answer to.
Putin is now looking at destroying Ukraine. He wants to create chaos in Europe, in America, in Australasia, I believe too. No one is immune from this. Putin can hold Ukraine if he wishes. The question is how expensive it is going to be, because it's up to the Ukrainian people to either resist or subdue.
A grim outlook for the future for people already in a state of deep suffering. Omer Dehen, SBS World News.
And Ukrainians in Australia say they're still struggling to come to terms with the violence now gripping their homeland. Many took to the streets today in disbelief and called on Australia to ramp up assistance immediately.
Russia, wake up!
A sea of blue and yellow. Ukrainian Australians rally against Russian aggression.
Stop Putin now!
Much of their anger directed squarely at one man.
This loathsome little one man has created all this, and we've got to put a stop to it.
Yeah, his people are going to die as well. Does he have any respect for life?
Many in this crowd just looking for some purpose as the reality of this invasion sets in.
It was the first headline that I saw was missiles strike Kiev and Kharkiv. I can say that my heart sank there. I was very scared for my family.
After a few attempts, Katerina was finally able to get through to her parents. Their accounts did little to put her mind at ease.
All the roads are blocked. There's panic on the streets, trying to get money out of an ATM, massive lines. The shops are empty. It's a very difficult situation there now.
World help Ukraine!
Here, many feel sanctions are not enough. They want Australia to ramp up economic, humanitarian and military aid immediately.
Help us to defend our country. Make sure that Ukraine stands. If Ukraine falls, you are next.
It's not just members of Australia's Ukrainian community here today. Among the crowd, plenty of Russians, making it clear they do not support their government's actions.
And actually, I feel very shame. I'm embarrassed.
I didn't sleep. I was crying. I love Ukraine. I have friends from Ukraine. I don't want to kill any Ukrainian people.
While some protested, others prayed.
The victory of Ukraine will be the victory of God's power over the arrogance of man and over the arrogance of one man in particular.
The disbelief still palpable at this Ukrainian church in Sydney's west.
For me, I think it was very much surrealness initially, unsure what to tell my children who are quite young.
Absolute shock. I was at work and to be honest, the last 2 hours of my day was just ablaze.
Today, that shock slowly being replaced with overwhelming uncertainty. Fundraising efforts beginning as aid agencies fear a humanitarian catastrophe.
We hope to raise $250,000 in conflict, sadly. Things like food, water, shelter are really fundamental.
All as this community braces for the anxious days and weeks to come. Claudia Farhart, SBS World News. And SBS has taken the decision to suspend the broadcast of 2 news bulletins, NTV Moscow and Russia Today, in response to community feedback from Australia's Russian-speaking community. News and information in Russian continues to be provided through the SBS Russian service across radio, online and through social media. Well, the Ukraine crisis continues to be the factor dominating financial markets. Raina Sarampayat has the latest finance news. Raina, was it as bad a day for equities as yesterday?
Happily no, Catalina. Nothing like yesterday's free fall when more than $70 billion was wiped off the ASX. Instead, a rather seesawing session. The S&P ASX 200 ended slightly higher at 6,997 points. This as investors ponder the impact of the latest financial sanctions on Russia. Well, earlier US stocks gained, especially the tech-laden NASDAQ, recovering from early losses after President Biden held back from implementing the strongest possible sanctions on Russia. Still, there's plenty of worry within financial markets.
Right now, you've seen the NASDAQ already fall into bear market territory, and the Dow also fell into correction territory earlier this morning. They're all deciding whether or not, does this, next escalation with the Ukraine-Russia situation lead to concern that we're going to see a recession in the U.S. in the next year or two.
Here, investors like those in the US showed relief that the US sanctions on Russia weren't as strong as they might have been.
They haven't really touched on energy prices. I mean, oil prices haven't been touched at all, and neither have key commodities like aluminium or even wheat, for example. And so for that reason, we are definitely seeing a lot of relief in the market today, in particular some of the tech stocks, which were quite aggressively sold off yesterday.
So, in a tech sector up 8% today, shares in Block surged 32%, with quarterly revenues topping $5.5 billion. Life360, a big loser yesterday, also recouped lost ground. Miners and banks remain under pressure though. Blackmores was the day's worst performer, a day after releasing its half-year results, but Harvey Norman soared, reporting a better-than-expected post-lockdown period, even while slipping to its first loss of the pandemic. The Australian dollar is buying just under 72 US cents. It's up against other major currencies, while gold, the ultimate safe haven investment, continues to rise, and there's the oil price, $94 US a barrel. Well, the Russia-Ukraine conflict looks set to worsen what's called food inflation, sending prices higher at grocery stores around the world. Around 28% of global wheat exports come from Russia and Ukraine. And in just a few days, global wheat prices have risen 19%. And they're only expected to rise further if exports via the Black Sea grind to a halt at harvest time.
After a bumper harvest, Australian wheat growers have capacity to help fill holes in the global supply chain if exports from major producers Russia and Ukraine are disrupted. But their thoughts are with the farmers facing uncertainty in the country's conflict.
Farmers in Ukraine are family farmers, just like here in Australia, and our hearts break.
Over a quarter of global wheat exports come from Russia and Ukraine.
In the case of Ukraine, around 48% of their exports head to Asia, and then a large portion of that actually competes directly with Australian wheat exports as well.
Ukraine suspended commercial shipping at its ports after Russian forces invaded, stoking fears of supply disruption. Should exports via the Black Sea be unavailable, countries would have to seek alternative supplies.
The biggest challenge we have is the efficiency of our own supply chain and making sure we can get the product from farms, from upcountry, down to our ports in a safe and reliable and efficient manner.
Australian exporters would need more shipping slots.
It will happen. It might just take some time for export capacity to rise.
Analysts say further rises in the cost of petrol are possible due to the conflict. That's despite those milder than expected US sanctions staying clear of Russian oil exports.
We've got the midterm elections coming up later this year, and the US doesn't want to see higher gasoline or petrol prices.
Partly as that could further fuel US inflation, the multiple interest rate hikes already anticipated. Uncertainty could keep oil prices up,
which risks a further flow-on of higher petrol prices here in Australia.
Volatility exposing motorists to record high prices.
These are global factors, unfortunately. There is very little that we can do nationally. These are entirely issues beyond the control of the Australian government.
A significant increase in global oil production in coming months is expected to counterbalance some of the rises associated with the conflict. Philippa Carisbrook, SBS World News.
Overall, a raft of financial implications from Ukraine. Catalina, we can only see how things play out.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Raina. Well, coming up next, a multi-million-dollar boost for Australia's space industry that could put Australians into space. And the sporting world set to ban Russia from staging several big events.
Tonight at 7:30, we journey through stunning scenery in a new episode of The Lakes with Simon Reeve. Then, it's new How to Build a Nuclear Power Station. And later, it's the Pyramids, solving the mystery.
No support coming out of prison is a recipe for disaster.
1 and 2 will end up back inside.
In a groundbreaking new series, would you open your home to a convicted criminal?
She's just let me into her house. Like, what the hell?
It's a bold experiment, but will it work?
It only takes one slip up.
My most comfortable
Something bad has happened.
Life on the Outside starts 16th of March on SBS and on demand.
There's a glass and a half in everyone. When you choose Allianz Comprehensive Car Insurance, you can choose to save on your premium by simply increasing your basic excess. Search Allianz Car Insurance to get your quote today.
Your backyard, your patch of pride, whatever your vision, Honda's Lawn and Garden range will bring it to life. Reliably built to start first time, every time. Honda Power Equipment is engineered for life.
I'm with one. So are nearly 5 million others. I'm one of them.
You too could be better off with a super fund run for you. Just look for the symbol.
Liberal and Labor's net zero means a 100% increase in power costs. No jobs, no future, government control. Vote 1, United Australia Party.
Authorised by Clive Palmer for the United Australia Party, Brisbane.
Struggling to make small talk? That's common. Looking forward to tapping your card? That's uncommon. Join HCF today. Uncommon Care.
Watch live and have your say. Eurovision, Australia Decides. Tomorrow 8:30 on SBS. A world of difference. Tuesday on Inside.
Do you consider yourself a conspiracy theorist?
Not at all, no. Why are some of us drawn to conspiracy theories?
It's this need to belong and a need for understanding.
And how these beliefs can impact relationships.
How do you feel about the person you were when you were into QAnon?
Not great.
We've had one family member who's no longer welcome.
Inside, Tuesday at 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
A federal jury in the United States has convicted 3 former Minneapolis police officers of violating George Floyd's civil rights during his arrest in 2020. The former officers were charged with depriving the unarmed black man of his right to medical care when fellow officer Derek Chauvin pressed his knee into the 46-year-old's neck for 9.5 minutes. His death triggered protests worldwide and a re-examination of racism and policing. The officers are now liable for sentences up to life in prison, but that is extremely rare. Australia's space industry will receive a multi-million-dollar boost from the federal government to launch spacecraft as the Prime Minister continues along the unofficial campaign trail. While the funding has been welcomed, experts say millions more will be needed before Australia sees a local liftoff anytime soon.
Trying to uncover the secrets of space.
What are you working on? Okay. Are you allowed to tell anybody?
Yes. With $65 million to help develop 3 launch sites across Australia and find some answers.
We are a launch nation with what we're doing here to invest in these launch facilities.
Hoping this funding will help better position Australia in the space race.
The space sector, as you know, is one of our key industry sectors that we are focusing on as part of our sovereign manufacturing capability.
But the opposition is pointing to the government's history on local manufacturing.
We can have a very bright future, but you can't have one if you're like this government, scared of the present but terrified of the future.
The announcement made on the state campaign trail.
This will power you for 3 to 5 years.
South Australia, home of the Space Agency, goes to the polls next month. Hopes the promise of new investment and jobs will bring in crucial votes.
In order for these incredible gains to be realised into the future, the return of the Marshall government here in South Australia is an absolute necessity.
As the Prime Minister also pitches for the return of his government, with the Adelaide seat of Boothby held by the Coalition on a razor-thin margin. While the funding has been welcomed, experts say it's just the first step to exploring the final frontier.
To really see these launch sites and facilities and this capability get to a full mature level, we're really talking in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Australia's unique geography makes it an ideal candidate to launch future missions. But realistically, to see spacecrafts take off locally within the next decade, millions more will need to be invested.
It will enable us to really have this native capability to realise our own ambitions in space.
But that'll have to be left to the experts.
Oh, don't touch it. Don't touch it.
Krishani Danji, SBS World News.
The sporting world has reacted quickly to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and already a number of major sporting events that were meant to be held in Russia are now under serious threat.
Russia's military action in Ukraine will have repercussions on sporting fields as well as battlefields. European football's governing body UEFA is meeting tonight to confirm the removal of St Petersburg as the host city for this season's Champions League final in May. And World Cup qualifiers are also unlikely to take place in Russia either. Sweden, the Czech Republic and Poland have released a joint statement openly opposing travelling to Russia for next month's matches on the road to the Qatar World Cup. Russia is set to host Poland and, if successful, was supposed to meet either Sweden or the Czech Republic also in Russia. FIFA's President Gianni Infantino, for now, non-committal.
We will communicate updates with regard in particular the upcoming FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022 qualifiers soon.
But Infantino was at least strong on this.
FIFA expresses hope for a rapid cessation of hostilities. FIFA condemns as well the use of force by Russia in Ukraine.
September's Russian Grand Prix in Sochi also at risk.
Just so shocked and sad to see what's going on. So we will see going forward, but I think my decision is already made.
As the invasion was unfolding, world tennis number 7 and Russia's second highest ranked player Andrei Rublev was advancing to the semi-finals of the Dubai Championships.
In these moments you realize that my match is not important. So it's not about my match, how it affects me, because what's happening is much more terrible. And like I said, you realize how important it is to have peace in the world and to respect each other no matter what.
A sentiment reflected around most of the sporting world. John Baldock, SBS World News.
Two of Ukraine's biggest sporting exports, the Klitschko brothers, say they are prepared to take up arms against Russia. The former heavyweight boxers Vladimir and Vitaly Klitschko have pledged to resist the Russian invasion. The pair has signed up, and Vitaly, who has been the mayor of Kiev for the past 8 years, called for support.
We must stay united against this aggression, against Russian aggression. Don't let it continue happening in Ukraine, don't let it happening in Europe, and eventually in the world. United we're strong. Support Ukraine.
Both men are former heavyweight boxing world champions. Rugby Australia has made the rules on foreign-based players being selected for international duty easier, but has capped the numbers of players allowed. Changes to the so-called Giteau law have reduced the minimum number of test caps to 30 and years of service to 5 in order to be eligible. But only 3 players per squad can be named.
We're obviously comfortable that that's the right number, and we've obviously done it in consultation with Dave and the other national coaches.
The annual Bledisloe Cup series against New Zealand will be scaled back to 2 matches until at least 2025 after a mutual decision by the Trans-Tasman nations. Alexander Zverev has been handed the largest fine allowable under ATP rules for his violent on-court outburst yesterday. The German smashed his racket repeatedly against the umpire's chair in Acapulco after losing a doubles match. In addition to being kicked out of the tournament and losing his prize money of just over $43,000, Zverev was today handed a $55,000 sanction, and he could yet face further punishment in the form of a ban.
Hopefully he can reflect on that and not let something like that happen ever again in his life. I'm sure that he's going to approach it maturely.
Djokovic will be replaced as world #1 by Daniil Medvedev next week after the Serbian lost his Dubai quarter-final to the Czech Republic's Jiri Vesely. Well, coming up next, the weather and blood donor drive. Australia's Islamic community comes to the aid of the nation.
Eurovision really is the ultimate dream for me.
Eurovision has always been a part of my world.
I feel like I've got so much to prove.
Are you ready?
You decide, yes, you.
See you there.
Eurovision, Australia Decides. Tomorrow 8:30 on SBS. A world of difference.
A COVID-19 booster. Have you had yours? It won't just reduce your risk of serious illness, it'll help protect everyone you love. So come on, New South Wales, let's do this. Book your booster today at nsw.gov.au.
Because house frames made with TrueCore steel have a high strength to weight ratio and stay straight and true, they're an ideal choice for modern home design. To find builders using TrueCore steel, visit truecore.com.au.
At Amy, we've insured all kinds of small businesses. So when it comes to business insurance, who covers thousands of businesses just like yours?
Lucky you're they.
Amy does.
We're all about making money good.
And I'm good to the bone.
Which is why we're giving you $3,000 to switch your home loan to me. Speak to me or your broker and switch for good.
With 25 years of hybrid electric and fuel cell innovation, it's in our nature to strive for a cleaner tomorrow. Oh, what a feeling. Toyota.
I'm here to tell you, honey, that I'm good to the bone. Good to the bone.
For over 25 years, we've been big on good. Good home loans with good rates and all-round good vibes. Not bad, right? So join me, the Aussie Bank, making money good.
I wish I'd proposed earlier. She's a keeper. I wish I got my bike before I lost my hair.
I wish I'd made the move to a VO sooner.
There's never been a better time. Take the first step to great retirement living with a VO.
I've come here to investigate a murder that shook this country to its core.
Your window to the world. All new Dateline starts 15th of March on SBS and on demand.
There's a world of stories available for free at SBS On Demand. Download the app or visit the website today. SBS On Demand. A world of difference.
To the weather, and a trough off the east coast is causing heavy rain and storms in southeast Queensland and northeast New South Wales. A developing monsoon trough is causing rain and storms in the northern tropics. A trough in Victoria is triggering showers and storms. In the major centres, heavy showers in Darwin, heavy rain too in Brisbane, partly cloudy in Perth, showers in Sydney, sunny in Adelaide, a shower or two in Canberra, partly cloudy in Melbourne and cloudy in Hobart. Looking further afield, thunder in Nadi, partly cloudy in Noumea, windy in Wellington and a few showers in Christchurch. In Southeast Asia, cloudy in Phnom Penh, thunder in Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, drizzle in Jakarta. Further north now, cloud in Seoul and Tokyo, fine in Hong Kong, partly cloudy in Hanoi. Heading west, a few showers in Beirut, rain in Tehran, partly cloudy in Islamabad, thunder in Delhi. To Europe, cloudy in London, drizzle in Madrid, fine in Paris and overcast in Rome. In Africa, showers in Algiers, partly cloudy in Dakar, rain in Nairobi and thunder in Johannesburg. In South America, few showers in Caracas, rain in Bogota and Rio de Janeiro, storms in Buenos Aires. And for North America, fine in Vancouver, partly cloudy in Washington DC and Havana, fine in Mexico City. Australia's Islamic community has launched a nationwide blood drive to help tackle the sharp decline in blood donations resulting from the spread of the Omicron variant. Today, those attending Friday prayers across the country were asked to roll up their sleeves and do their bit.
For Imam Abir Thanvi, today's appeal to the community in Sydney's southwest strikes at the very heart of the Quran's teachings, with those attending today asked to make a very important contribution, something of themselves.
Charity is giving something valuable from your own side, and what can be more valuable than blood in your body?
Red Cross stations have been set up at 43 mosques across the nation, organisers hoping for at least 1,500 registrations.
Blood is a real game changer and lifesaver, and the need is always there. Every 24 seconds, we're transfusing blood across Australia to somebody.
The impact of the Omicron transmission has been significant for desperately needed blood supplies. 100,000 blood donors have been sidelined due to the infection in recent weeks, with half of all appointments cancelled.
Rather than sitting on sideline, we go out, reach to the community and tell them how important it is.
That message heard loud and clear, with many lining up to participate.
Definitely, it has been overwhelming, and we're looking forward to working with them in our centres across Australia.
People who signed up today will be booked into one of the Red Cross's blood centres, like this one in Sydney's southwest. The whole process takes about an hour, but it's time well spent. Each donation can save up to 3 lives.
Those patients who are having the major surgeries in operation theatres, the trauma victims, and also the women during their childbirth.
Bakatsamin and Hiba among the first to sign up, both choosing to give blood for the first time.
It's just a small prick, and that's nothing compared to the lives that you could be saving.
Definitely going to be coming back again.
Today's appeal also broadened to encourage other communities to roll up their sleeves and do the same. Dom Vukovic, SBS World News.
In Ghana, hand-painted film posters once attracted large crowds to movie theatres, but the unusual art form is dying out as online streaming platforms and home theatres replace cinemas. One talented painter is trying to keep the tradition alive and is gaining international notoriety.
Crammed inside this art studio on the outskirts of Ghana's capital, Accra, Daniel Jasper is finishing up the final touches on a work commissioned by a foreign collector. The veteran movie poster designer is well known in Ghana for putting paintbrush to canvas over the past 30-odd years, inspired by some of the world's most popular films. But the market for his work, which once had Ghanaians clamoring for cinema seats, has changed.
People are no longer interested in going out to watch a movie when it can be watched from the comfort of their own phone. But there is a growing interest in owning these hand-painted posters internationally. When someone watches a movie and they like it, they might place an order for a poster, and now they hang them in private rooms or show them in exhibitions.
From the 1970s, Ghana developed a tradition of advertising films with these vibrant hand-painted posters. At the time, local cinemas were flourishing, and artists competed over who could entice the largest audience with their imaginative, eye-popping designs. But with the rise of the internet, the curtain came down on Ghana's independent cinemas. Joseph Frimpong is a university professor in pop culture anthropology.
We need to have a way of motivating, upcoming artists to be rooted in this tradition, right? Of course, they can, move on to other art forms, but to preserve this way of painting, we need to have a way of, motivating these artists, to grow.
While Jasper's work has gained international appeal, young artists struggle to gain the same recognition. Many turn to painting shop signs or commissioned portraits to make a living. Jasper says to keep the cinema poster tradition alive, up-and-coming artists must be taught how to earn from their work.
International demand has given us the money to sustain our careers, so we teach the younger generation so that they too have something with which they can take care of themselves.
Passing on the paintbrush for future generations.
Gillian Wolfe reporting from Accra. We're recapping our top story on the war in Ukraine now, and missile strikes have been reported in Kiev, with fears Russia is moving on the capital. Ukraine's president has made an address calling for a ceasefire and saying he understands he's Russia's #1 target. US President Joe Biden has announced new sanctions, saying Vladimir Putin will bear the consequences, and protests have taken place around the world, including in Russia's capital. Well, let's return to Ben Lewis now for the latest on the ground in Ukraine. Ben, which locations are of most concern right now?
Yeah, Catalina, in a word, it is Kiev, and things are moving very quickly there. At the start of the program, we were talking about Ukrainian concerns that Russian forces would try and enter the capital at some point today. Well, in the last few minutes, reports of small arms fire in the northern suburbs of Kiev. It's understood Russian troops have been moving down from Belarus through the Chernobyl exclusion zone, which they managed to capture yesterday. The Ukrainian army detonating, blowing up some bridges in the area to try to slow the Russian advance. One thing we haven't been able to get much clarity on so far in this conflict: the number of Russian servicemen and women who have been killed. The UK's Ministry of Defence says it believes 450 Russian soldiers have already lost their lives.
Ben Lewis, thank you for the very latest from Ukraine. That is The World this Friday. If you missed some of tonight's bulletin, you can catch up on the SBS News website shortly. Thank you for your company. I'm Catalina Flores from the team. Good night.